All right, so Brother Tanks, Sister Tanks, everybody that's listening in and watching this, we thank y'all for joining us. We want to continue our session that we had last week, that we started last week, concerning the things concerning their marriage. And we had asked you all to talk about uh, uh, the death of your first child and how it made you all feel. And, so we're interested in hearing from you all what that conversation was like, and what you all gathered from that conversation.
So we had ended up talking about it, and basically the conversation went. I was telling him how I felt about the situation, and he was explaining to me that how he felt about it. And during that time, um, because he moved on so fast, my husband he grieved differently from me. He moved on like pretty fast. Like I guess it's like how you mentioned how King David was and how King David was in the Bible. He let it go and brushed it off. But me, I was still stuck there, and I was telling my husband, because I felt like I had to move on so fast, that I didn't get to grieve properly, and I felt like he didn't care because we never talked about it, and we never talked about it. So I always felt like he really didn't care. And looking back on it, I can see how it was selfish of me because, like it was said, he lost a child too. It wasn't just my child, and but I saw how he coped with it during that time, and also what you all were saying about how all those seeds that were sown from people talking to us, like talking against our marriage even before we got married. Like we both saw how that affected us because we never even went back with those things. So that was like we were just shocked of how the enemy. I know I was. Yes,
You were what?
like shocked, like just how the enemy played it. Like people telling things and then people telling me things. And then when that time came when we were supposed to come close together, we weren't. And I was able to see that like even further down in our marriage, different things happened and we weren't able to come together like we were supposed to. Um,
Okay. You haven't been to. So, you mentioned King David
mhm.
and basically his mindset when his son died, how he was in, basically how he was mourning and praying for his son, and then when the Lord let his son die, uh, he basically got up, um, recovered. After they thought that he was going to. I think we find that in 12th chapter of the book of Second Samuel, and they thought that he was going to lose his mind or act odd about it, but in reality, what he did, he got up. Um, let's read that. Let's go to the 12th chapter of Second Samuel. We're going to start reading at verse 15. Go ahead and start reading.
And Nathan departed unto his house, and the Lord struck the child that Uriah's wife bare unto David, and it was very sick. David therefore besought God for the child, and David fasted and went in and lay all night upon the earth. And the elders of his house arose and went to him to raise him up from the earth, but he would not, neither did he eat bread with them. And it came to pass on the seventh day that the child died, and the servants of David feared to tell him that the child was dead. For they said, Behold, while the child was yet alive, we spake unto him, and he would not hearken unto our voice. How will he then vex himself, if we tell him that the child is dead? But when David saw that his servants whispered, David perceived that the child was dead. Therefore David said unto his servants, Is the child dead? And they said, He is dead. Then David arose from the earth, and washed, and anointed himself, and changed his apparel, and came into the house of the Lord, and worshipped. Then he came to his own house, and when he required, they set bread before him, and he did eat. Then said his servants unto him, What thing is this that thou hast done? Thou didst fast and weep for the child while it was alive, but when the child was dead, thou didst rise and eat bread. And he said, While the child was yet alive, I fasted and wept, for I said, Who can tell whether God will be gracious to me, that the child may live? But now he is dead. Wherefore should I fast? Can I bring him back again? I shall go to him, but he shall not return to me.
So does everybody see that? I shall go to him, and that's one of the things. That's kind of how a man thinks. Like you heard me say before, ones and zeros. There is no in between. My fasting ain't gonna bring him back. If it was gonna bring him back, he wouldn't have died in the first place. So he switches over just that fast from praying to God that the Lord would save his son, and he understood, well, since the Lord didn't save his life on this side, then I will go to him. Just that quick. Just that quick, you see. So he said, I shall go to him, but he shall not return to me. All right, so we'll finish reading this in a little bit. So, Sister Tanks, you were saying that you felt some kind of way because you feel like you didn't have time to grieve, and you felt like maybe your husband didn't care about you because he wasn't grieving like you thought he should. Is that basically what you were saying? Or didn't grieve? You felt like he was able to move on quicker?
Yes, and a part of me felt like he didn't care about our son, just how fast he moved on. Like, I had asked him if he was even sad about it because he moved on so fast.
Yeah, well, we just read that story there, how men are ones and zeros. A man can be sad about something, but also know that you know, he got to live. And he's able to switch from where we are now to eternity. That's what David did. He won't come back to me, but I'll go to him. You see that? As long as I'm living for the Lord and things like that. And so um, then you have to keep in mind how young you all were. And, that's a very, I tell you, that the death of a loved one, that's a very tricky thing. That's one of the things I don't touch with people unless the Lord direct me to, because when people's loved ones die, they're in a sense of heightened emotion, and they're on the edge, and you could say something to try to comfort them, and it could backfire with the quickness. I mean, with the quickness, you I'd heard somebody say that somebody had told them, I understand when their mother died. They said, oh, I understand, but their mother wasn't deceased yet. And this person said, no, you don't either. Your mother's still alive, and it's like, And then you could have somebody whose mother has passed on, and you could say, "Well, I understand," and then they could say, "Well, no, you don't, because you didn't have the same type of relationship I have with my mother. You know that you didn't have. You know it's one of those things. It's very tricky, and I think I had taught on that not too long ago about grieving, and it's one of those things that we have to be aware of our own emotional state of mind, especially when we're grieving, that we're not, because it's kind of like when something like that happens that we can't explain ourselves, we tend to want to, it's easy to blame people, and instead of us just saying, okay, this is a loss that I'm going to have to ask the Lord to help me to deal with, we can, you know, people can become the target of that loss, because we got to have, that's the reason why, one of the reasons why is so many wrongfully convicted people in prison. Because it ain't about convicting the right person, it's about somebody need to pay for what's done happened. And so that's one of the reasons, because people grieving, and maybe it's their loved one was murdered, and they don't care who gets convicted for it. It's just somebody need to pay. And so sometimes that's the way it is, even when there is no crime involved. Somebody has to pay. And so that's one of the things we have to keep in mind whenever we um, going through things. That one of the things I believe we ought to do is ask the Lord not to uh, allow the devil to take our emotions and run with it. Not to be overcharged in that area, so that we don't um, so that we don't be used by the enemy, basically, to make a situation worse than what it already is. And so it's a tricky thing. I have a relative who um, was telling me one time that she had divorced her husband because basically it was a lot of things that had happened in their marriage, but she said the final straw was when my mother died, and basically he was being insensitive about it. And so it's one of those things that if a situation is already kind of bad and already kind of iffy, it can make it worse if it's not handled properly. All right, go ahead. Mm.
Now, I was just thinking about how you said, when you have that hurt there, and especially when it's something that can't be explained, how you target it, towards somebody. Somebody has to pay, or, you feel the need to blame somebody for it. And just thinking about how that looks in marriage, and Sister Saints, I heard you say just a few minutes ago that you could see how some things played out. And I guess that was kind of my question. Um, if you could see some specific things that played out as a result of you targeting your husband because you felt like he didn't care. Because that's a little bit differently from even feeling like, oh, you moved on too fast. Because if you can acknowledge that you moved on too quickly, just for you, you could, at least you're acknowledging that he cared, but you felt like, oh, well, you just didn't care. And just wondering if you can identify any situations where you could see you targeted him and he became, um, the target of your hurt, or, whatever angle, whatever emotions you had about that particular situation, and how that's played out over the years.
I guess it would mean I can't think of any specific, but I can see the lack of respect possibly because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it would be the lack of respect.
Okay. And what about, since you all have 4 children now,
Mhm.
um, have you seen it play out in that respect in terms of looking at your husband deal with the rest of your children and maybe pinning that same tag on him, like, oh, you don't care?
Yes, ma'am. Um, mm, um, we were when we were talking about specifically when we had little Charles, like when he was first born. I remember when we first took him home, I wanted to take care of him. Like I didn't allow my husband to, I guess, come in the way that he was supposed to. And it wasn't on the front part of my mind that I was doing that. But my mother-in-law came to me. She's like, "This is his son too. Like, let him take care of his son too as well." So since you mentioned that, I can see that was a situation. Um, with that.
So can you see beyond that how even when it comes to maybe disciplining the children and his rules or concerning the children, how that could have played out later on in the marriage, like you still had this thing of feeling like you needed to, because you felt like your husband didn't care, maybe deep down inside, you still felt this need to protect the children from the husband who don't care.
Yes, sir.
Oh.
Yeah. See where I thought he was too hard on them.
Mm-hmm.
Like in my opinion, it may be too hard. But I noticed like when he would deal with the children, it would bear good fruit. But in my mind, it would be me thinking that he's too hard on them. Um, yeah. Yes, sir. I can.
And to me, it's one of those things how the devil is slick about it. He plant a seed at the beginning of a marriage and the beginning of a relationship, and you can go on for years. And here we're talking about some 9, almost 10 years later, and you could still see the fruit of that seed that the devil planted, and but have moved on away from the seed, if that makes any sense. And so not really able to identify the root of the issue because you moved on away from that, but still seeing the fruit of it play out in your marriage. And that's again, like I said before, that's the genius of the devil. He'll plant a seed. My husband don't care about me, or didn't care about our son because he's moved on so fast and didn't expect me to move on, whatever the case is. And so from there you have 4 more children, and it's still the same thing. Still could be the same thing playing out, even though you're years down the road and might not be able to identify with that, with where that thought process come from. That's one of the things that the Lord say the same will be preaching on that uh, this Saturday about our thought processes, and everything that we have done is based on our thought process. All of our actions is based on our thinking. And one way we change our actions is by figuring out where did this mindset come from? So all of our actions is based on how we have processed something, our thoughts. And so we have to get to the root of, if we want to change our actions, we have to get to the root of what caused me, what thought processes, how have I been programmed to even come up with these actions, if that makes any sense. And that's what a devil is a master at. He plants something and he'll move you away from that years later, but the whole time he has given you the thought process to cause you to act. It's kind of like if you press the letter J on your computer, then J is gonna pop up. Why is that? Because that your computer have been programmed for when you press that letter on your computer, that's what's gonna pop up. You could go in, a technician could go in and program it to do something else. You could press the letter J and the letter L come up if it's programmed right. You see, and so oftentimes people pressing the letter J and they seeing L come up and they're thinking, so why is L coming up? Why is that? That don't make any sense. Well, you got to go to the root of that computer and to basically to its motherboard, what they call the processor, and change how it sees what you're doing. And so, and that's the way we have to be. We have to actually. That's the reason why we renew our minds. And sometimes renewing our minds don't just mean stuff that we see in the future. Okay, so I see this, I'm gonna try to change. That's what make us revert back to the same actions because we're not renewing our mind about stuff in the past. If that makes any sense. And so that's what we make our mistake at sometimes is trying to renew our mind. Okay, so I'm gonna think differently for the future. But if the seed is still planted there and you don't see things differently that what happened in the past, then every time you press J, L is going to still come up, you know. And so that's one of the things we wanted to bring out.
No, I just think that's a really great point that you pointed out about renewing our mind about things in the past, especially given the fact that you can have a thought, like what Sister Tanks thought, okay, well, you don't care. And if you don't care about child number one, then you don't care about child number 2, 3, and 4 down the line. And it will continue to affect, the way you just deal with everyday life. From a respect standpoint, from a child rearing standpoint. But when you go back to square one and say, well, you know what? You actually did care. And not only did you care about that child, but you care about our children now and every child that has come after that. And it helps you to readjust the way you handle things. And even because you have to understand that anytime, like you have husband and wife, and the wife thinks she has to protect the children from the husband because of whatever she perceives, then she has also sown seed in the children to think that there's a difference between the way mama loves me and the way daddy loves me, and she's protecting me. So it's like they take that on also, and so it gives you an opportunity to undo that, when you can go back and pull up the root, for yourself, then it gives you a chance to undo that also with the children.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say the other thing that I think is also important about that when you're talking about renewing your mind, one of the things that can be really hard for some people is the idea of undoing that thought process. Like it's kind of like coming to the Lord, and especially somebody who's been in a church their whole life and they've learned things a certain way, and then they hear the truth and it's like, oh, wait a minute, so everything I believed was wrong. I actually have to start over from square one. And if we're not careful in situations like that, the enemy will come in, with pride and try to give you justify that, you were justified in how you were thinking, you were justified in how you were acting, and that everything you did and said couldn't possibly be wrong. And I was just thinking, that we have to really be mindful of how subtle the enemy is in that way, so that when the Lord gives us an opportunity to renew our mind about things and to uproot things like that from the past, that we don't allow that the enemy to bring thoughts like that in reverse, what the Lord is doing.
And that's one of the things we have to think about just on the spiritual side. I believe that we as believers, we ought to keep the devil busy. The devil ought not to be able to sow something in our lives 9 years ago and then go on about his business and just come back and check every now and then to make sure that what he's sown is still working. He need to be able to come up with something new every day, And so we as believers, and I'm saying that to say this, we as believers have to be on the lookout to make sure that that we're not running around the same track over and over again that the devil have set us on. And so in this case, the track would be the mindset, the seed that he has sown in the mindset. And I imagine he does that in a lot of marriages. And until our minds change about certain things, and I'm a firm believer in that actions change when mindsets change. We can have all the good intentions in the world. Okay, we can't will ourselves past our mindsets. We have to have a renewed mind, because if our minds aren't renewed, then we're going to produce the same action, and we'll be doing a lot of repenting, and so our minds have to be renewed. All right, did you all have anything to say concerning what we're saying?
I just have, I guess, like a comment to what you were. I can see how, if this wasn't brought out, about like me not caring and things like that. Well, my wife assuming that I didn't care, and how, we already have 4 children now. I could see how we would continue to have the same issue over and over and over until this was addressed and actually brought out the right way, instead of just like I said, we're already 9, 10 years down the road and 4 children, same scenario. So I want to comment about that, and also back to the part when my wife was saying, just say, that we didn't talk about it. It's very strange that we never talked about that. Because it's like, even like when we came home from the hospital and things like that, that was something that I left alone. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to, I guess you could say, like, relive it. But at the same time, I see how that was also not the right move to make. I understand that I could have gave her time, and myself time as well to grieve and things like that, but then revisit it after, we were like strong enough to handle it. And I could see how not addressing it sooner played a part in us years later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what I was going to say. Let's read verse 23 and 24. Let's read verse 23 and 24 of that chapter. 2 Samuel, the 12th chapter.
But now he is dead. Wherefore should I fast? Can I bring him back again? I shall go to him, but he shall not return to me. And David comforted Bathsheba his wife, and went in unto her, and lay with her. And she bare a son, and he called his name Solomon. And the Lord loved him.
All right, so you see that, and that's what I was going to ask, is what would you have done differently if you were, what would you have done differently, Brother Tanks, in that situation? I think you mentioned it. I think that's where you were going, is you would have comforted your wife and would have talked about it. But again, it goes back to what I was saying last week. My 20-year-old self was a silly somebody, and that we have to keep that in mind. It's we as we get older, we get wiser about how to handle situations, and that's a tough situation to deal with, especially when it comes to us bearing our own children, and so it's a tough situation to deal with. And I imagine a young person, that's just starting off in life would rather, I guess the way they would handle it is not talking about it. I might have been the same way. I believe I'd have been the same way, just not really, especially as a man. Women, they come here wanting to talk, about everything. Let's talk. I had a bad day. My boss looked at me wrong. They come here wanting to talk about their emotions, and and just every little detail of their life they want to talk about. Men aren't that way, and that's the way God made us. We're not necessarily wanting to talk about it. And so we see what David did. It's not that he talked to his wife about it. The Bible says he comforted her. And so that's one of the things we have to keep in mind as we're growing in the Lord, especially as a married couple, allowing each other to grow and knowing that my last year self is different than my today self. And if I could go back and do certain things, I would do it differently. And I believe it's important that we forgive our 20-year-old spouse. You know, you know. I think that's very important. So, Sister Tate, you were saying that you felt like, and I want to say this because I believe the Lord laid it on my heart to share. I believe it's important that when you all meet strangers and you all are talking to them, don't just say that you have. If they ask how many children you have, don't say that we have four. You say we have five. One of them is deceased or whatever, but don't make sure you're not excluding that. Just like what David said, I shall go to him. You see, so don't exclude the first child because he ain't not existing. He's somewhere. If that makes any sense. So you don't exclude the first one. That's part of the Lord's way of helping us to understand, And I think, all right. So I think it's important um, that you don't exclude um, your first child, if that makes any sense. Yeah. All right. So, Brother Tanks, Sister Tanks, did anything else come of that conversation?
Not. I guess like just for me, pretty much what you had just said about comforting and things like that. I wish that I would have been in a position to be able to let my wife grieve the way that she was supposed to, or the way that we were supposed to, because she didn't have time to do it that way, because she went straight back into the workforce. So I wish that you know, that was handled differently, because I feel like um, that is the cause of some of the hardness, of just over the years with that, things like that. That could have been not even in the picture had that didn't go that way.
Hmm. So I have a question. And this is for both of you, what changes have you seen in your marriage since this talk that you all have had?
We actually talk and hug. So it's one day he came home. This blew me out the water. He had home, and the children ran up to him.
Oh.
Your mama. So he told them.
Oh my
I was
God.
like, are you serious? But we've been enjoying one another, talking more.
I don't think they heard you. I don't think.
Oh, they didn't hear
No.
me?
Yeah, he said he didn't hear you. Yeah.
He had come home, and after being gone for like I don't know, 2 days, and the children had ran up to him, and he told them to get out. He don't want to see them. He's like he want to see their mama. But it's yeah.
Hmm.
Well, I say for me, I feel and know that a wall has been knocked down. Just from us talking about it. Um, I feel like trust is being restored back between me and my wife, and I feel like I can talk with her more about, just I guess you could say like just different things, that I would kind of hold back from talking to my wife about. I feel like I can trust her with talking to her about different things. She's a lot more attentive to pretty much everything, and and I know that us being this way is going to help us to grow together spiritually as well. It's only been a week now, so and I feel like we're already seeing the benefits of talking about this, getting this rectified and moving forward from it.
Yeah. Well, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. So it sounds like to me like the enemy had sowed discord between you two,
Mm-hmm.
and which was the cause of you all not being able to come together and be on one accord like you should be, as husband and wife. And just something that old, something that's as long ago as that, and that have been between you all for all these years. And so I'm glad to know that the Lord have torn down the wall between you all, so that you can continue to grow and enjoy your marriage. You know, that's one of the things that the Word of God tells us, that we should live joyfully with the wife of our youth. And because that's our portion under the sun. It's like and it goes on to say how we're gonna have a lot of different heartaches and a lot of different things we're gonna have to go through in life. But one thing we ought to be able to do is to live, at least have a happy marriage. That's our portion under the sun, is having a happy marriage, and the devil knows that. The devil knows it. That this is what your marriage is, what's supposed to help you get through tough times. The devil knows that, and so because he knows that, he sows seed between husband and wife, and so that whatever they go through, even if it's happening to both of them, they're going through it alone, because of the wall that's there. And so I'm glad to know that the Lord is helping you all's marriage, and that is looking better than what it looked uh, last week. And I look forward to hearing more of the testimony that'll come from that. Did anything else come up in the conversation that you all had?
Is it just in particular to our first child, or is it in um, or is it also about my brother, or when we are staying out there in Texas?
Just anything that might have come up that you all talked about and worked out.
Well, the situation that happened in Texas, that's something else that we talked about. It was real brief, but basically we talked to one another about it, and I was able to see her side of how she was feeling about me talking to my brother about something as sensitive as that was,
Hmm.
with concerning her, and I was able to see her side, and then she was able to see my side and why I actually went to him, and just wasn't trying to I guess, talk down on her and make her look a certain way in front of different people, just things like that. And she, well, you can go ahead and say what you said. I can't even talk for you.
I was just like when we were talking, I was just expressing to him that I didn't see the innocence of what he was doing back then, and how I had asked him for his forgiveness for just thinking impure towards my husband in that situation. I had also shared with him some incidents that happened that made me feel uncomfortable, and that's basically what the conversation was about. That um, about Texas.
I just wanted to ask a quick question about, whenever you have to deal with like sensitive subjects, you have to talk about things that you've kind of skated around in the past. Um, Approaching it can maybe feel kind of awkward, but I'm wondering, did either of you feel like you had to get over like some thoughts maybe that the enemy was bringing, that this conversation is going to end up like a past conversation, it's not going to go well, or um, just any type of thoughts like that, or anything that you had to move past, like just to kind of focus on, okay, this is our chance to really reconcile and get out in the open and talk about what we need to talk about, despite how things may have gone in the past.
No, not in that situation. No.
I did. Yeah, but it was more so dealing with our first son, because I remember how, she was when it happened. I was like, man, that's something I do not want to talk about, and that we go all the way back to that, and just different emotions like start coming up, and I was like, I was kind of hesitant to talk about it, but because I want to say she had even called me on the phone and was asking. He said, "Is it okay if we continue this conversation?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course. If you feel like we need to talk about it, we can talk about it." And she asked me, she was like, how did you ask? I think he said something like, did I care or?
I was like, I actually were you even sad? Like, were you sad about him passing? Because, yeah, that's what I asked him. Were you sad about his passing?
So her asking me that question, that also brought me back, because I can, like, back then I could tell that she was upset at the fact that it happened and putting the blame on me. And now here we are. She asked me if I was sad about it, and I'm just like, man, but I told her, I was like, yeah, of course I was sad about it, but I couldn't stay there. I couldn't, just continue to live in that moment. I felt like, I grieved how I was going to grieve, and I want to hurry up. Well, not necessarily hurry up, but I want to go ahead and move past it. So I felt like talking about that was a very sensitive subject. It's just like Brother Bolden was saying. It can go way left talking about it. And I was kind of hesitant and nervous about talking about it.
Yeah. So moving forward, do you all feel like um, since the wall has been torn down in you all's communication and things, do you all feel like you can talk about anything with each other when it comes up?
I feel that way, yes, sir.
Yeah, y'all look different this week. Y'all look different. Yeah, that's a good thing. But isn't it amazing how it's just something I'm not gonna say that simple, but just something like that from years ago can just wreak havoc in our lives today if we don't do things the way, do things the way they ought to be carried out. And my prayer is that these other married couples are hearing it, what we're talking about, not just in this ministry, but whoever else is watching it or listening to this, that they will hear what's being said, so that they can apply that to their lives. And I think about like what you said. You all talked about what happened in Texas, and you probably could tell that what all happened in Texas was a result of what wasn't talked about in Louisiana. You know, and how that taints everything. Our outlook. We're gonna respond if sister. And here's the thing we have to think about. Um, just like I said, our processing, our thought process. So if your wife felt like you moved on too fast, that you weren't sad, you really didn't care about the loss of your first son, and that you basically, and so which equal you not caring for her, and this is one of the things we have to realize. When somebody feel a certain way, they feel that way. In our minds, especially as men, we could think, well, at some point you gonna come to the realization of what it really was, except they don't. You know, you could think, yeah, at some point they're gonna grow out of it, but they don't. We have to talk our way out of it. We have to talk about things. And so, but we have to keep in mind that our spouse really feel the way they feel. Their truth might not be my truth, but they're in their world, and that's the way they feel. And we have to make sure that we don't just leave them out there feeling that way, hoping that they grow out of it. And that's for both spouses, for husband and wife. That we have to do our part to make sure they don't stay there. So one of the things I want to say, what I was saying earlier, is I think it's important that you all go back and, how can I say, revisit maybe things that have been said that have been that hurtful, or things, actions that have been done, and make sure that you can trace it back to what you talked about together as husband and wife last week about the loss of your son, because that way you're not leaving any stone unturned. So I think that's important, that now you all move forward, talk about things that I think it's important for husband and wife to be able to talk about things that have hurt them, and basically to clear the air of any misunderstandings, if there are any more misunderstandings. That way you don't give the devil any room to come back later with stuff, if that makes any sense. So I think that's very important, that now that you have identified what the source of a lot of things were, um, make sure that there are no stones unturned, no rocks uncovered, I guess you could say. And that way it's like you're starting off fresh. My wife and I, we've talked about that before concerning being on cloud nine. And I think it's important that married couples stay in a place where they're in love with one another, and they are giddy to see one another when they do see each other. And because to me that equals a healthy marriage. And so I think it's important that way. And also, since children have been involved in this, that things be explained to them as well, in a way they can understand if actions are going to change in the future, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. It's important that if seeds have been sown in them regarding their upbringing or whatever the case is, I think it's important that those seeds be rooted up so that they don't grow up, with the fruit of what you all have gotten past, if that makes any sense. and I'm going to react to that. I'm sending a heart, you all. To him. Did my heart come through?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I was about to say, I meant that mess.
Oh, man.
All right, did you all have anything else you wanted to share?
I'm excited to go back and talk about the different things that happen after, the loss of our child and things like that. Because I know that there's been a lot of stuff that's been done because of that, but not really knowing that it was because of that. So I'm excited to see how all of that comes up and is played out.
Mhm. All right, and so if you all don't mind, can we have another session with you all, with discussing what you all have discussed and come up with concerning, the what the fruit of the thought processes were, if that make any sense. Because I mean, if you all look carefully, you'll see just like what happened in Texas and things like that, how all of that was just the fruit of feeling unloved, if that makes any sense. But it was basically what it all boils down to. You don't love me, so I'm gonna do me, and I'm gonna look out for me. And even when we have children, I'm gonna look out for us, and it's just gonna be. And then, Brother Tanks, you being on the receiving end of it, your mindset could be the same way. Well, you know what? You don't love me, so I'm gonna look out for me. And then now you have two people living in the same house, but just in two different worlds. You looking out for you, and I'm looking out for me, and and things like that. And so I think that that's important that you go back and revisit the fruit of that, that very thing, and it'll help you to forgive. Uh, things you don't want to leave anything unturned. And what I mean is, so you could say, well, you know what, we're past it all now. We've gotten to the root of it, and now we're all past it. But that don't negate the idea that things still need to be asked for forgiveness for,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes any sense. It may, because if not, then those things will still be present, even though you've gotten to the root. You can kill a tree and still have the apple of that tree, if that makes any sense. And so you still want to go back and make sure that you done got all those apples, that you done, that, so that there's nothing in between you all, asking each other for forgiveness for even if when you know the root of it, asking each other for forgiveness for things that have come from it, if that make any sense. Yeah, so if the Lord say the same, we'll meet back up. We'll, do this again next week. I think now we kind of got it down, how, how to kind of fit in the screen without sitting on each other's lap, I guess. But and of course, my apologies to all of you that had to wait. We just, this is one of those things we might air at some point, and I wanted to make sure that it was going to be right,
Yeah.
All right. So, did you all have anything else you wanted to share?
I'm just thankful. Because even tonight, like, that just blew my mind about how that event that happened is affecting the way that I am with our children today. Like, that just blew my mind. And it helped me to see just how cunning the enemy really is. And I'm thankful that the Lord exposed it. And I'm looking forward for what else the Lord is going to expose that the enemy has sown.
Yeah, we are too, and of course we're thankful we're thankful that you all were open. I'm hoping that you all read the comments from last week. Like all the comments that people have shared, because I believe this is going to help a lot of people. I believe, like my wife and I, we've shared with married couples before. If you want to be married a lifetime, you have to have a lifetime of forgiveness. And that's the truth. And sometimes we can just bypass stuff without forgiving, and the whole time, it's can be damaging to our relationship with our spouse. And so I'm looking forward to it as well. And my prayers is that I believe it's really going to help some other people as well. And again, you have to think about it. Just think about you know, these things could have been uncovered, but it wasn't time yet. Sometimes things got to come full circle. And that's what I thank the Lord for. That these things are being uncovered at the time that they are being uncovered. Especially you think about this, coronavirus is out there, everybody's staying snuggled up on each other. You you see in the news where the divorce rate done went up.
Yes, sir.
Because people are having to deal with each other. They having to be up on each other all the time. They don't have all of these escapes plans that they had, before. And so my prayers is that I believe that this will be a blessing to people, just to think about the sovereignty and the wisdom of God and how he does things, and that's one reason to forgive each other as well, is to know that it was all a part of God's plan and he knew exactly what he was doing and when these things would take place. Yeah. All right. Did y'all have anything else you wanted to share?
I didn't.
All right. Well, if the Lord willing, we'll meet back up again this time next week. The Lord say the same, and we will talk with you all some more about what you've talked about, concerning other things that have come up because of this issue that we've discussed. All right. Thank you all for joining us.